I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Our City. And once again, the City of Elizabeth and the County of Union have plenty of vaccines available. You can visit ucnjvaccine.org, the City of Elizabeth website, elizabethnj.org, any of our social media accounts, or call our public information office at 908-820-4124. If you're not vaccinated, we encourage you to get vaccinated. If you're in a crowded room or crowded areas and you're not comfortable, wear a mask or a face covering. Follow social distance rules. This vaccine is important and this virus is not over. Personal responsibility is extremely important. If you need any information, call our public information office at 908-820-4124 or visit any of our social media sites. Now, I'm pleased to be joined for our tonight's show with a great guy who's now going to be the new congressman from our district, and that is Congressman-elect, we can't quite say that till November, but Mr. Rob Menendez. Rob, welcome to the show.
Mayor, thank you for having me on.
So you're through the June primary where you had a couple of opponents, and what's the position for November? Is there an opponent in November?
Yeah, so we have someone running for the Republican, who has a Republican nomination for November, and we're running a full campaign. As you know, this is an office that you have to run every 2 years, so it's important to take advantage of every moment that you have to connect with the voters of the 8th Congressional District. And so while it's a heavily Democratic-leaning district, which puts us in a great position for November, we're going to continue to work at it every single day and make sure that we're connecting with our voters so we understand the challenges that they're facing.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Rob. You grew up in the 8th District, naturally. Your father once held the seat, so it's not like you don't know the district.
Yeah, so I grew up in Union City, New Jersey. Both my sister and I were raised there and went to school there. My father was in elective office from the time I was born. My mother was a public school educator in the Union City system until she retired a few years ago. So, you know, I grew up around this. I grew up around a commitment to serving the community, serving the public from both of my parents and my grandparents as well were engaged in their respective rights, and had the opportunity to really appreciate what this area means, especially a place like Elizabeth, which to me reminds me a lot of Union City and the district at large. So the district is 44% of the folks who live here were born outside the country. So it's an immigrant-heavy, working-class, middle-class district. It's a place of opportunity, and a place where folks seeking opportunity come to start their American story. And so to me, the opportunity to represent this place, which I've always called home, was an opportunity that I couldn't pass on, especially in this moment when there's so many challenges facing our families.
So speaking of families, you're about to have a new addition soon. Tell us a little about your family and the nights you're going through now. You have one little one.
Yeah, right? So our daughter turned 2 in April, which, you know, and the challenges the last 2.5 years have been difficult for a lot.
So it's a COVID baby, really, right?
COVID baby. She was born April 19th, 2020. So the one sort of positive out of all of this craziness was that I got to be home with her almost every single day, and it's been incredible. So my wife and I live in Jersey City. That is where we are raising our family. Like I mentioned, my daughter turned 2 in April. She is the boss in the household. She makes it clear, in terms of constituents, while she can't vote yet, she is the loudest, most vocal constituent that I will have. She lets me know when I need to not be doing something, and she actually walks around the house and identifies everything I need to fix. So she is a taskmaster, and we are expecting our second in September. So really fortunate. Everyone's doing well, and it sort of reminds you why you do this, right? And one of the reasons that we sought this office was because I was thinking about my daughter and thinking about the world that her and kids that age are going to inherit. And a lot of the challenges that we're facing are are really difficult, right? These are big fundamental challenges, as you know, right? We're talking about our democracy, we're talking about the well-being of our country, and the idea that I might have this opportunity with Congressman Sears retiring to do a bigger part, leading this country in a different direction. I felt a need to do it. I felt a responsibility to our community, to our families to do it. So every day when I wake up and I see her, I get the time to spend with her, and then I have to leave to do different meetings and events. I always think about her.
Well, I got to tell you, as a father of a daughter, there's nothing more special than a father-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
You will enjoy this.
No, listen,
and it goes quick.
It does, and
grow up fast.
And that's true. And like I said, even being home with her every single day, it's seeing how big she's gotten already is special. But you also realize it does go fast.
So you're an attorney. What were you doing before your run for Congress?
So for the last 10 and a half years, I've been an attorney in private practice at Lowenstein Sandler, so a national law firm. Worked with a variety of clients, but the last couple of years working with a lot of early stage companies, a lot of the entities that fund those early stage companies, and seeing a growth in making sure that capital ends up in the hands of companies that are led by traditionally underrepresented founders. So minority founders, people who identify as LGBTQ+. So that way, when you think about who's growing these small businesses, it's a range that represents a diversity of our community. So it's something I've been really proud of. For the last year, a little over a year, I've been a commissioner at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which has given me the opportunity to think about the region and sort of the transportation infrastructure needs of our region. Elizabeth obviously plays an important role in that, and having the opportunity to work alongside folks like yourselves and other stakeholders to ensure that we are doing what we need to at the agency to provide that high-level infrastructure transportation system has been an incredible opportunity. And from a civic perspective, for the last several years, I've been on the board of trustees for a small independent school in Hoboken, the Hudson School.
How many students in that?
So it's a very small 5th through 12th grade school. In the high school, there's about 20 kids in each class. So it's given me a nexus to sort of the educational needs of our communities, even though it's in a private school setting.
Is that a charter school?
No, it's just an independent, sort of, it was founded, I think about 30-something years ago by a wonderful woman, Sue Ellen Newman, and trying to create a learning environment to foster this global awareness. That was her mission when she started. We're needs blind admission process, so it really creates a diverse student body, and the education is incredible, and it's, to me, a model for what we should be doing in our public schools as well. So, I've been engaged for as long as, since 2011, I graduated from Rutgers Law School in Newark, seeing the different issues that are impacting both the public side of things, from the Port Authority to how we grow our businesses, from what I do as a lawyer, and bringing all those experiences, plus, as you mentioned, being born and raised in the 8th Congressional District, is sort of guides my view about what's needed in this moment, how we can best serve the constituents.
So one of the questions I often get asked is, did I always plan to go into government or politics, or did I get bit by a bug at one point? Well, you grew up in a political family. I grew up in a family where my father was a letter carrier and president of a union, but not elective office. So was it the family history, or did you get a bit by a political bug one day? What made you decide?
Yeah, it was always, my sister and I always grew up in this environment where we were always engaged with the community, and my parents both served the community in different capacities, right? Elective office, my dad was a mayor when I was born, and then now United States Senator. My mother, as I mentioned, was a public school educator. So we always saw this giving back, in both of my parents' professional careers, also what they did in their free time, and it was always inside of me. And the way I looked at it was, in terms of elective office, that was not something I felt like I ever needed to pursue. Giving back to the community, doing something beyond just sort of myself and my family, yeah, that was always going to be important to me. I had the opportunity to do that, as I mentioned, through the Port Authority and being a trustee at the Hudson School. But when Albio decided to retire, and looking at the challenges that we're facing, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about my daughter, to me, that was when all those things that were inside of me about giving back to the community, being an advocate for your community. I just didn't feel like I could fulfill that doing the things that I was doing, and this opportunity gave me a chance to go all in on being service to the district. So that when I realized the challenges that we're facing matched with an opportunity to do something about it, that was when I realized I had to pursue this opportunity.
So was there somebody you looked to, role models, guidance, besides Dad? I mean, as
listen, the truth of it is I've been fortunate. I've been around politics and elective office since I was a kid, right? So I've seen people like yourself who have been terrific public servants and stewards of the office that they hold. And there's been a lot of great models. The mayor and senator of my hometown, where I was born, Union City, Brian Stack, I think is a tremendous public advocate who works tirelessly for his constituents, right? And I think that's something that
I don't think there's anybody who does it better than him.
Definitely no one who works harder than him. And you work hard, and I know you do, and the people of Elizabeth should know how hard you work. Brian is relentless. And in a time when I think people are frustrated at a lot of levels of elective office, when they're losing faith in a lot of our institutions, you see polling about Congress, the White House, the Supreme Court. I think having that service-oriented approach to public service, the way Mayor Stack have done it, is our models in terms of re-engaging folks, right, and putting the constituent first. That's why, we always joke about I'm always in Elizabeth, right, because having that proximity to folks, right, understanding, meeting them where they are, gives me the opportunity to better represent them. And so I think for me the model is the folks who are on the front lines, who are fully engaged, who go out into the community and meet the people where they are. That's the best model in terms of how you can do this well, because at the end of the day, no matter what office you are running for, you are asking to be a representative of your constituents. And to me, that means you have to understand them. You have to understand their struggles, their aspirations. And that's why I love just being in the various communities that are part of the 8th Congressional District.
So you talked about Washington and Congress and everything else, and main priorities, you've kind of covered them in a lot of ways, but as we all know, it's very dysfunctional there.
Yeah.
How do you try to bridge this, Rob? It's a challenge.
For sure. So the one thing I always tell people is, and I've seen this, having first my father was represented this district when it was the 13th Congressional District, and having a close relationship with Albio, is constituent services, right? As you know, is the core of what we all do. And having an offices that can connect people in the 8th Congressional District to federal resources, to me, is how you create and meet the need of folks immediately, right? Whether it's visa issues, immigration issues, access to federal programs, right, like Medicare, Social Security, et cetera, ensuring that people have an advocate for them. That sort of creates connectivity between the federal government and what people are feeling each and every day. In terms of legislatively, you got to be willing to take risk, right? And I think that's the challenge right now, is because as a lawyer, I know if I always say no to a client, right, don't do that. No, don't. I could always be right. And I think, as you know, as a legislator, you could never take a risk and never be wrong, right? But I think in this moment, when people are frustrated and they want solutions, we have to be willing to take risk, right? We were talking earlier about this beautiful city hall and how it was built during the post-Depression federal programs. They experimented back then. A lot of it worked. And I think right now there's a paralysis of where we're afraid to take any action because of how we'll be judged. Can't be afraid. We have to be bold. We have to be willing to take risk, even if that means at the end of the day, we put our chips down for something that we think is going to benefit our folks, our constituents. If it doesn't work out, we'll be held accountable. But we got to try. We have to create action.
So organized labor is important in your campaign, and I mentioned earlier about my dad was a letter carrier, president of the union, actually took the post office out on strike. There was a warrant for his arrest back in the late 60s. It was kind of an interesting time in our household. But organized labor is important, not only in New Jersey, but to your campaign, and it's important going forward. How do you work with the organized labor issues?
Yeah, they've been tremendous supporters of our campaign, and I hope to be a tremendous supporter of their causes. When I think about a couple of things, one, in my own household, on my mother's side, both her and my grandmother are members of NJEA. So I saw the difference in having family members who were part of a union versus my father's family. Both my grandmother and grandfather immigrated here from Cuba, never had the opportunity to be part of a union. And I saw how being part of a union household versus a non-union household made a difference, as I'm sure you did in your own life, in your own household with your father. And to me, when we think about the growing wage gaps between the top executives and the average workers within the same company, right? And we also see the downward pressure on the ability to collectively bargain and unionize, to me, if we can lift up unions, the ability to collectively bargain, the ability to ensure safe workplaces, right, which we saw with COVID, I think we can give workers greater standing. I think we can start to shrink the gap that we see now, both on the wage front, in terms of the respect for the work that people do. Because right now we talk a lot about the worker, but we don't actually respect the worker. I think unions do a good job of uplifting the worker, not always the executive, and leveling the playing field. So I've been extremely humbled by the support of, I think it's about 23 union organized labor groups. It's been a fundamental component of our campaign. And the last thing I'll say is just because I also believe I'm part of the Democratic Party. And I think a lot of people right now are frustrated both with Republicans and Democrats. To me, when you go back to where the core pillars of the Democratic Party, organized labor is one of them. And so being clear about that signals that we are going to pursue policies that, one, benefit workers, which then benefits working families. And if you benefit workers, families, you're going to uplift our communities. I think unions are a strong way to do that.
So, Rob, tell us about Elizabeth. You've been here an awful lot since you announced your candidacy. We've talked on the phone numerous times. You've worked with our city chairman, Tony Teixeira, and visits and restaurants, favorite restaurants, campaign story. What sticks out the most here?
I love Elizabeth. And the truth is, I've mentioned this to folks on our campaign, if you at any point in the campaign said we have to go to this municipality in the 8th Congressional District, I'd be happy to go anywhere. From the smaller municipalities like East Newark and Guttenberg to Elizabeth, one of the larger municipalities. The 8th Congressional District really is special, and Elizabeth is one of my favorite places to visit. To me, it reminds me a lot of the communities, like a lot of the community that I grew up in. The diversity of Elizabeth sort of reflects the diversity of the 8th Congressional District. Not saying this because you're here, but Elizabeth really does have a wonderful set of elected officials. A lot of your council members I've gotten the chance to know. Your county commissioners have been wonderful as well. Your municipal chair I am fond of. It's a great group who they work really hard, and you guys work as a team. So having the opportunity to come down here and see that firsthand and see how you're doing this important work for the folks of Elizabeth, as I mentioned earlier, is a model for what I want to achieve at the federal level for people in Elizabeth and the 8th District as a whole. Some of my favorite experiences, as you obviously know, there's a huge proud Portuguese community here in Elizabeth. So between marching in the parade, flag raising, going to the Portuguese instructional hall on numerous occasions, have been some of my favorite experiences, just sitting down, having perhaps a cold Portuguese beer, and enjoying the company of yourself, the electeds, people who call this place home. It's always a special time when I get to come down here.
So we'll close with your slogan, strengthening families. You've talked an awful lot about it on the show so far. How do you build on it?
Yeah, so we have to, as we mentioned, we have to meet folks where they are now. And for a lot of folks in Elizabeth, the 8th Congressional District, the last 2.5 years have been a struggle. And this feeling like they're not getting ahead, right? So when you talk about inflation, the rising cost of goods, even with historically low unemployment, people are still struggling, and they're doing everything they possibly can to get ahead, but feeling like they're in the same spot as where they started. So my opinion of government and what we can do at the federal level is how do we create programming and different policies that will help those families. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the family is the nucleus of everything, right? Of our communities, from Elizabeth to the county to the district to this country. And if we can find ways to support our families, to support our children, right? Creating better access to early childhood education, which to me is fundamentally important. How we sort of lower the cost of childcare. So not just so the children are benefited, but so the parents who are engaging in the workforce have more capacity to do so. To how we take care of our elders, right? Because, my grandmother passed away last year, 98, but just sort of looking at what the last 2.5 years of COVID, it was extreme isolation for folks like that. So how do we provide programming to ensure that we are taking care of our elders, our children? We alleviate a lot of the stresses that are on the backs of working families. I think that's how we support our families. That's how we strengthen our families. If we focus on that, from a policy perspective, especially as a Democrat, we focus there, we can see great growth for our families, for our communities, district, and country as a whole.
I want to thank you for taking the time to join us here in City Hall.
My pleasure.
For Our City. Look forward to working with you, not only during the upcoming campaign, but as our next congressman from the 8th District.
Be my honor.
For Rob Menendez, I'm Mayor Chris Bollwage. We'll see you next week on another edition of Our City.